Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. I'm so thrilled you're here with us today. Look, if you're the kind of person who loves just cutting through the noise and unpacking complex ideas straight to the core, you are absolutely in the right place. Today we're tackling a puzzle that literally touches all of our lives at some point: community harmony. We're calling this one The Secret of a Peaceful Town, and we're going to lean on some really fascinating historical and spiritual observations to piece this whole thing together. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The Puzzle of Peace.
You know, when we talk about human coexistence, there's this massive underlying mystery that philosophers, sociologists, and community leaders have been banging their heads against for centuries. Why do we get along? And maybe, more importantly, why do we just suddenly stop getting along? It begs this super fascinating question: why do some communities argue less? I mean, have you ever actually noticed this phenomenon out in the wild? You can have two totally different groups of people, right? And both groups are made up of folks who share the exact same values. I mean, they read the same books, they follow the same rules, they might even live in the exact same neighborhood. But in one group, they are constantly at each other's throats, bickering and competing over literally every little thing. While the other group, they manage to live side by side in relative peace. So where does that difference actually come from? Because if shared values were the only magic ingredient required for peace, well, every single community with shared values would be a perfect, harmonious utopia. But as we all know from just looking out the window, that simply isn't true.
Looking at it this way brilliantly illustrates this confusing reality. Just picture these two scenarios side by side. On one hand, you've got shared values plus conflict, but on the other, you have shared values plus peace. We are looking at the exact same inputs when it comes to foundational beliefs, but wildly different outputs in actual day-to-day behavior. Seeing it laid out like this really helps click things into place. It shows us that there's an X factor missing from our traditional understanding of community dynamics. There's some hidden variable out there that dictates whether a group spirals into toxic conflict or if it maintains a steady, reliable peace. And to figure out what that hidden variable actually is, we are going to dig into a very specific historical reflection. Which brings us to Section 2, Nursi's Blessed Town.
So, to track down that missing variable, we're turning to the reflections of Said Nursi, specifically drawing from a part of his work called the 20th Flash. He was observing his own environment, his own local community, and honestly, what he wrote down gives us our absolute best primary clue for solving this puzzle of peace. He noticed something pretty remarkable about the town where he was writing this treatise. Let's read through his core observation together. He says, "This blessed town has a fortunate fate worth being grateful for. Among the devout, the scholarly, and the spiritually inclined here, the disputes born of rivalry seen elsewhere are far less common." Now pay attention to the specific groups he's calling out here: the devout, the scholarly, the spiritually inclined. These are the exact people you'd naturally expect to just get along perfectly, right? They share these incredibly high-minded ideals and pursue spiritual growth. Yet, Nursi's acknowledging that in other places, these disputes born of rivalry are totally common, even among these highly educated and spiritual folks, but not in his town. In his town, they somehow manage to dodge those typical everyday disputes, and he sees this as a fortunate fate, something to be genuinely grateful for, rather than just taking it for granted.
Now, what's really fascinating is how he clarifies that statement. He writes, "Even though the deep love and unity that should exist between them isn't fully there, at least the harmful opposition and competition found elsewhere is absent." Okay, this right here, this is a massive paradigm shift. Nursi is not claiming that his town is some flawless utopia where everyone holds hands and loves each other deeply and unconditionally. He openly admits that the deep love isn't fully there. But the key, the absolute core of his observation, is that the harmful opposition and competition is entirely absent. He's giving us this beautifully pragmatic, highly realistic view of human relationships.
And that leads us to Section 3, Rethinking Community Harmony.
So how do we take Nursi's observation of his specific historical town and apply it to our own understanding of everyday peace and coexistence? Like, if perfect unconditional love isn't the absolute baseline requirement for peace, what actually is? How do we redefine harmony so that it's something we can actually achieve in the real world? Well, the crucial point is how we set the goalposts for our communities. Think of a less conflicted community. It's not necessarily perfect, it's not necessarily bursting with deep love, but it is a place where harmful rivalry and competition are completely absent. By redefining harmony as simply the absence of toxic rivalry, we create this totally realistic, attainable starting point for peace. I mean, think about how incredibly freeing this concept is. You do not have to be best friends with everyone in your neighborhood, or at your job, or in your local organization. You just have to collectively agree to take toxic competitive rivalry out of the equation. That alone creates harmony. It completely removes the pressure of forced affection, and it replaces it with a highly functional mutual respect.
Let's break this down into 3 key takeaways, just to really cement the idea. First off, perfection is not required for peace. This is huge. If we sit around waiting for perfect unity and unconditional love, we're going to be waiting forever, and we're just going to constantly feel like we're failing. Second, harmful rivalry is the true enemy. It's not actually a lack of love that destroys communities, it's the active, simmering presence of one-upmanship and rivalry. And third, the absence of competition is a starting point for gratitude. Nursi treats this realistic baseline, literally just not fighting, as something to be profoundly grateful for. Before we can even begin to search for deeper connection or the root causes of profound unity, we have to establish this baseline of non-competition. It's a foundational step that we so often skip over, mostly because we're just too busy aiming for an impossible utopia.
Moving on to Section 4, a call to unity.
But here's the thing. Once that baseline of non-rivalry is firmly established, where do we actually go from there? Let's zoom out and see how this builds into a broader spiritual context from our source material. We're moving from the practical absence of rivalry to the ultimate higher-level goal of truly standing together. The text gives us this profound directive. Hold firmly to the rope of God all together and do not become divided. This is from Surah Al-Imran, chapter 3, verse 103 of the Quran. While Nursi's observation gave us the incredibly practical starting point of removing rivalry to get a baseline of peace, this verse provides the ultimate goal: overcoming division entirely and holding together. It really emphasizes that unity is an active, continuous process. The metaphor of a rope here is so powerful. Think about it. A rope is something you use to pull yourselves up. It's something you have to actively grip. You don't just passively exist in a state of peace. You have to hold firmly together. It requires collective effort and shared focus to ultimately move past mere tolerance and step into real active solidarity.
As we wrap up the explainer today, I really want to turn the lens back to you. Have you seen a community where people with very different views still manage to coexist respectfully? And more importantly, what made that possible? Was it a shared higher goal? Was it some unspoken rule against toxic rivalry, exactly like Nursi observed in his town? Take a moment today to just reflect on your own experiences with respectful coexistence. Because understanding the underlying mechanics of peace, it's not just some fascinating academic exercise. It is a vital, practical tool for navigating our everyday lives and improving the spaces we share. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack all of this today. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and I really hope you bring this grounded perspective into your own communities.